Bring a Trailer podcast.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Bring a Trailer podcast. Alex Porter here, director of auction production for the company. Joined today, very excited to be joined by Bill Noon of Symbolic International. Bill, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure to be here.
We're thrilled to have you. You've been around this hobby and in this profession for a long time, and you've listed a lot of amazing cars on Bring a Trailer. You've got a long history with our company and even with our founder, Randy, I think. But before we dive into talking about that, I'd love to hear a little bit about your background. You're kind of a fan favorite. Our community loves you and loves your big comments when you post on the site. So I'm sure people would love to hear about your background. How did you get interested in cars, Bill? What was the first thing that grabbed your imagination? Do you come from a car family?
Not specifically, but machinery oriented. My father was an engineer. Most of my family's from New England. I grew up on a small farm in Massachusetts. And from a very early age on, I'd help my father with, working on, the old tractor that we had, or, helping him, change the fluids and filters on all the vehicles. He tried to do all his own maintenance himself.
What kind of tractor was it? Do you remember?
Gravely.
Oh, wow.
Gravely. And I just bought a tractor for my own tractor yesterday on Bring a Trailer.
What'd you get?
I got a 1941 Ford N9,
Oh, is that
and
the silver and red?
all gray.
Oh,
It's
all
got
gray.
it's
Okay.
got a red front grille on it, but no, it's a early version. So they didn't get the two tone effect until they think they came up with the next model, the
Okay.
8.9 or something like that, or 9.8, whatever they were called. They like the 1948 version. But
Gotcha.
no, I'm excited. I've had a farm here in New Hampshire for going on 3 years, and I'm very jealous of all my neighbors. I have tractor envy. My neighbor across the street has three. My neighbor next to him has two. Then the lady up the street, she has four, and I have none. So everywhere I went, I kept telling my wife I have tractor envy, and I want a tractor. And she said, "Why?" And I said, "Because I want to do some tractoring."
Do people use them to get
And
around? Do you live in one of those communities where people will take them down to the store to grab something?
no, no, no. They just use, because there's a lot of big farms around here. But no, they put them to work, and it's got a lot of different changes in seasons, different weather, and different things going on. So you can plow with them. You can do digging. You can dig pipes, holes, whatever you want to call it. They have little attachments where you can drill down and put posts in and things like that. I've got an old 1950s, 1960s abandoned haunted tennis court in the back of the property. I want to dig that all up and tear it all up and put in some fruit trees back there. So we'll put it to work.
Wow, the story keeps expanding. That's fantastic. I have tractor envy of you. I love tractors too. So early fascination with tractors and with the
Yeah,
farm
well, just
equipment.
machinery in general. So anytime anything that would break, my father would give it to me, and I had a small little set of tools. So, like, I remember we had a washing machine that failed because I poured, I think, BBs inside of it, and so it burnt out. And so they gave it to me, and I disassembled it, and all that was left was just the frame, and with the little spinning thing inside of it. And used to sit inside of it, and that was a rocket ship, and gave my sister a twirl and a whirl inside of it, and not too happy about that. But I was working on, like, my father had a 1963 Chevrolet sedan, and my mom had a '67 Plymouth Sport Fury, and so they were changing the spark plugs out and setting the timing and the dwell and all things like that. My dad helped me make a dwell meter so we could learn about old ignition systems and setting them up. And then, we always had something we were working on. Like I said, we had the tractor, and when a lawnmower wore out, I took the lawnmower apart and used the engine to make a go kart and stuff like that. And then, my fascination with cars probably came about with the a transition when I was in my very early teen years. I saw the movie American Graffiti,
Oh, man,
and
that's a great one.
it was a great movie,
I
and
just rewatched it. It holds up. Have you watched it recently?
yes,
It's a
I
great
haven't seen
movie
it
still.
recently, but I mean, I've seen it so many times. It's
Yeah,
basically, I have it memorized. But
sure.
so then from that point on, I was really fascinated by anything from the pre-war hot rods all the way through the muscle cars. And when I was about a year before I got my driver's license, my ex-girlfriend had been given a 1970 Mustang by her father, and it would only run occasionally. And so I couldn't figure out what was wrong with it, but I made a deal with her, and I traded a broken camera for it, and I ended up pushing it 2 miles from her house to my house with my friends. And my parents had forbidden me the day before. They said, "You can't have a car. You can't have a car. You don't even have a driver's license." And so my mom came home and saw the car in the driveway, and she went ballistic. And then my dad came home, and And my mom was all upset and said, you know, and my father's looking at it, he goes, what'd you pay for that piece of junk? And I said, nothing. I traded my camera. And she said, your camera was broken. I said, yeah. He goes, well, does it run? I said, sometimes. He goes, well, and he's like, now he's like turning around and he's finally said, you know, that's probably like a $1,500 car. And trying to justify. And my mom's like, no, you have to tell him it was really bad. He doesn't even have a driver's license, but he couldn't because he just realized that I'd gotten a really nice, cool Mustang that didn't have any rust on it. It just was kind of paint was faded on it. So my dad helped me look at it, figure out what's wrong with it, and we took a coil from another one of the vehicles and installed it, and it was running perfect after that. And so the next day, I bicycled down to a junkyard and bought a $2 coil. And the car doesn't know what kind of coil it is as long as it's a 12-volt coil. So we installed that and fitted it and fired right off, and it was perfect. Never missed a beat after
Amazing.
that. And then
How long did you have that car?
so that went through so many. So that was, like I said, a year before I got my driver's license. So within a year of that, I had already traded that, and I got a '67 Mustang Fastback, and then I had a 1970 Chevrolet Camaro, and then I had a '74 Trans Am Pontiac Trans Am, and then I inherited the farm truck when I went to college. I went to Maine Maritime Academy up in Castine, Maine, and so I had that truck for a while, and then ended up getting a Olds Cutlass, 1972, I think it was, with a Rocket 350 V8, and that was my college car. And I got through, going to school at the Merchant Marine Academy in Castine, Maine. Maine Maritime was a full time school. You don't really get summers off. You're either cadet sailing or you're sailing on the training ship. So a lot of schooling and a lot of training. But I got to see a lot of the world. The first ship I ever picked up was a Greek freighter out of the Houston Ship Channel. It was back when mid 1980s, and back then, if you flew and on business, you flew with a jacket and a tie, and you had to be respectful. And it was much different than taking the bus like it is nowadays on like Spirit Airlines and all
Sure.
these crazy go fly by night places. But anyway, got down there, picked up the ship. They were really nice. They treated me. They said, we're going to speak English for the first week, and then after that, you need to learn how to speak Greek, and you act and behave and do what we do, and you'll have a great time. So as an
What was that
engineer,
what position did you have on the
I was
ship?
an
Were you like
engineering cadet, so
okay.
they treated me and paid me as a third engineer, even though I didn't have my license at that point. But that's where they treated me and gave me a nice cabin. And great ship, beautiful container. It was a combination of a break bulk freighter, so it had 5 cargo holds, and it carried anything that they wanted to. It could carry grain, it could carry containers inside the cargo hold, it could carry coal, bauxite, and then on deck we had four self-unloading containers, cranes, so we could carry containers on deck, and went to some great places. So we went from there. We went to Mardi Gras in New Orleans, which I'd obviously never seen anything like that in my life, which was fantastic. Then from there we went to Brazil, and then from Brazil we went to the west coast of Africa, and I was in Angola and Nigeria, and Congo was beautiful.
Oh
Congo
my
was great.
gosh.
Angola was
World
not
tour.
great. It was pretty cool.
No, no,
And
no.
Angola was now it's I guess a much better, but back then they were in the middle of a massive civil war, and there were more
Uh-huh.
Cuban soldiers than anything else. And then from there went to France, Boulogne-sur-Mer, France, and then to Germany, and then
Tour
around the world.
tour
And then
tour of the whole Atlantic,
it
of the
is.
whole Atlantic up and
Oh,
down.
everywhere. And we went to the Pacific too. That
Amazing.
ship went everywhere. And then it finally ended up back in Philadelphia. And I'd been at sea for about 6 months. So I signed
That's
off, and
amazing.
yeah, it
And you're
was
down in the engine room the whole time, down in the engineering spaces?
yeah, but I mean, I also, I had already had some training, deck training as well. So I would love to go back up onto the bridge and fix our position. Wanted to see
Oh,
if we really were
cool.
in the same place. I had
Yeah, yeah,
recently
yeah.
learned how to use a sextant,
It's
although at that point,
pre-GPS, right, at that point?
yeah, were just starting to use. They still had Loran and Decca back then, and but they weren't the pinpoint accurate to the way that any of the GPS was. Even when GPS came out, it wasn't until I was in the Navy that I saw GPS that was actually really sophisticated,
Yeah.
because initially they were building in error factors of upwards of a half kilometer in the
Wow.
GPS, because they didn't want people. They were afraid to give that technology
Oh, they were
to the
afraid
public.
people would see how accurate it
Yeah,
is, right? Yeah,
exactly.
yeah,
So they
yeah. Uh-huh.
put an error factor into it, and when we're on the minesweepers, obviously, if you're looking for mines, you want to know exactly where you're
Yeah,
at.
totally.
So our error factor was 1 meter, which any ship can be a minesweeper once, and we
Yeah,
didn't want to
totally.
contact
That's
any of the
hilarious.
mines. But
Do you remember what the specifications on the engine were in that freighter? It was a
yeah,
huge
so that
diesel
one was
engine, presumably.
that was a diesel 7 R&D 105, so 1,005 millimeter bore, and
Wow.
basically about 4 stories tall. It would idle at 28 RPM, or it would start at 28 RPM and it would idle at 32. And
Wow.
it was normal was a 56 to 60, and I think max RPMs were 72. So it was direct drive.
Yeah.
You shifted
How
when
many
you
how
want.
many cylinders?
Seven cylinders. So
7.
all these inline big slow speed two-stroke diesel engines, you always want to be have an odd number of cylinders because you want them to always one cylinder, one piston to always be at close to top dead center. And so when you go to fire the thing off with compressed air, you won't have to get the have to use a small motor to borrow the engine over to get it to one of the pistons to the top. And
Yeah.
that one had a single giant supercharger on it. I sailed on another one, another ship later. That was a 12 R&D 105. That was a monster 12 cylinder inline, huge engine. Same height. It was still a 3 story tall engine, but just massively long on a big container ship. And then the rest of them were almost all of them were tankers. And I sailed on steamships as well. I had a steam and diesel license. So
Oh, wow.
when I finally got out from graduated from the academy, initially I was working not as an engineer. I was working as the captain on a small boat in Boston Harbor, having a
Oh, wow.
really fun summer. And then the got my orders to go on active duty in the Navy because of the crisis in the Persian Gulf. Iran and Iraq had been at a 10-year war, and it was going nowhere. It was a stalemate. The Russians and the Americans were playing each side up against each other, basically to keep them perpetually fighting each other. And the Iranians had had enough, and they just said, nobody's paying attention to us, and this war is never going to end. And it's a stalemate. So they had all these 250 kilogram and 500 kilogram mines on anchors, old fashioned contact mines. So they took them off their pedestals, off their anchors, and just put at the end of a barge and just pushed them all into the ocean and free floated them. So it did as much damage to them and their own ships and their own
Sure.
cargo terminals as it did to everybody else. But it definitely took out quite a few ships. And President Reagan said, we'll send the minesweepers in.
There you
And then
go.
the Navy said, which minesweepers are those? And they said, the ones we've been paying you money to take care of and keep. They hadn't used these minesweepers since Vietnam. They had been keeping them active on the rosters and the seaports at various places, but they were not in good shape. But it was choice duty. So if you're a graduate from Annapolis and you were squared away good sailor or an engineer, you wanted to get on these minesweepers because you got your sea pay and it was a 9 to 5 job. They never deployed.
Yeah,
They stayed in the places they were deployed at
totally.
were San Diego, San Francisco, Treasure Island, Seattle, Mayport, Florida, Key West. I think we had them in the Subic Bay in the Philippines. I think we had maybe a couple in Yosuka in Japan. So this was choice duty. And these guys just loved it up. And as soon as Reagan said we're sending the minesweepers over to the Persian Gulf, all of these dedicated crews and all the Annapolis graduate sailors who got these as choice duty, they all got favors and got off these ships in a second because none of them wanted to be any part of what was going to go on when these things deployed. It was just they knew the writing was on the wall. They had Packard diesel engines, and
Yeah.
the tools on board were made out of magnesium and not magnesium, made out of phosphorus bronze.
Wow.
You can't have any steel on these ships, for influence mines.
Of course.
And so the engines are made out of stainless steel, and it's 1930s technology.
Wow. Were you an
And
engineer on those ships
yeah,
too?
I
Is
was.
that what
That's
you're
my main job supposed to be. So then I got recalled to active duty to go on active duty. I was supposed to be as a training officer to teach others because they knew that I had a background in old ships, and they figured they knew that I was not married and was not going to make the Navy a career, and they could do anything they
Uh-huh.
wanted to me. So they were going to send you to San Diego TAD, temporary assigned duty, for 6 months, and you'll teach other Navy officers how to work these ships, get them qualified. And I was only on board the ship. Ship was in a shipyard. It was like walking into something from a museum. It was pretty crazy. And I was
Was
only
that
on
your
board.
first by the way, was that your first time in San Diego? Is that how you got
Yeah,
connected with San
no, I
Diego
actually
for the
went there
first
as a
time?
kid. I went there as a cadet. Actually, it took they used to have a beautiful naval air station up in Brunswick, and you could go there on the weekends on Friday and catch a P3 Orion that was going on a logistics run from the Brunswick Naval Air Station to San Diego, and then you take another plane back on on a Monday. So you go on a leave on a Friday and come back on
You
a
go there for
Monday.
leave. Oh, that's
Yeah, so
fantastic.
it's really cool, and they let the cadets always fly the airplanes. They put these things on the autopilot so it maintained its elevation, and then you just flew from one radio station to the next radio station, and the crews loved it because these things are like driving a bus. They're boring as hell.
Sure.
If you're not out on a mission, hunting a Russian submarine, it's just so boring for words. And as a cadet, you think, oh, it's cool. I'm gonna get to fly the airplane over the Grand Canyon,
Yeah.
and they put you inside this thing, and you're flying it, and all of a sudden you realize after about an hour going from one radio station, then you turn it to the next one, that this really sucks. There's got to be something better. And
Yeah.
meanwhile, the pilot and the co-pilot have gone in the back and climbed into the racks and gone to sleep.
Oh,
So
man.
the only time they wake up if an alarm goes off, or if you go back and wake them up and say, listen, okay, I'm ready to turn this thing over to somebody that knows what they're doing.
Oh,
But
man. I remember those things flying out of Moffett Air Force Base up here in Northern California. They had the big boom sticking out the
yep,
back,
yep,
the
yeah,
Orions. Yep.
magnetic anomaly detectors
Yep.
on it. Yeah,
They were
they're
doing the
very
same kind of were they looking for mines too?
fairly sophisticated. No, they were all strictly for
Or they're looking for
submarines.
subs? Right. Yeah,
Submarines,
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that's right.
They got clever with the last of the minesweepers, and they switched over the roles to helicopters that could definitely detect mines much
I've
better,
seen that.
both
They
in
drag
from
like a big sled through the water, don't
they
they, or
can,
something
or
like
they
that?
can just do it through magnetic, anomaly detection system. But then, of course, now the technologies advance even further, and you can have mines that are basically made out of plastic,
Oh,
and
man.
then they don't, then they float really well, and they don't really have any corrosion issues or problems with them. But the mines we were going after were 250 kilogram and 500 kilogram old fashioned. They got the glass horn. The 250 kilogram one had three horns, and the 500 kilogram one had five, and inside was a copper strip and separated by petroleum jelly. So when the horn would break hitting a ship, then the contact would be made between the two copper strips after the petroleum jelly washed away in a few seconds, and then the mine would detonate. So they took out a bunch of different ships, and they did send these minesweepers over, and they were crewed by all volunteers supposedly. And of course, I got my orders were to go over there, but what they did is to get sailors the incentive to go over, as they would tell them. If you volunteer to go on a minesweeper for 4 months in the Persian Gulf, no matter how dumb you are, we'll give you any A school you want. So
Oh, okay.
the absolute sailor fireman recruit that could not not smart enough to get in any school, just too dumb, would take the chance and go on these 4 month tours, knowing that he'd get a guaranteed A school. So we were not getting the best and the brightest. And then, of course, by the time I was on my second tour over there, what we were getting was just bizarre. So everybody flies in civilian clothing. You don't know who's who, and you get greeted. They bring everybody out on a barge that gets towed out, and so I'm out there with my clipboard. We're rotating the crew off. You rotate one quarter of your crew off every 4 months, so you have 4 month rotation. Every month you get 25% new people. And I got my clipboard. I'm trying to find out who's coming on board, and I see these two guys, and they were really old. One of them looked like Santa Claus, and he was like really old. And I said, "What's your name?" And he tells me, "Seaman such and such, gunner's mate, first class." And I said, I looked at him, and of course I was the all ripe old age of 24, 25 years old. And I got to ask, son, how old are you? He goes, "I'm 64." I
Wow.
go, "And you're a first class petty officer?" I said, "Okay, you've been in a lot of trouble. Why have you been in the Navy?" Because I mean, this guy should have been senior chief
Yeah,
at this
sure.
point. And because he goes, "No, sir, I've been squared away from day one." I said, "What did you do?" He goes, "Well, I've been on battleships my whole life." So this guy served on, he was the plank owner, means he was the first crew on the USS Missouri in
Wow.
1945, 1944. So he was on the battleships in World War II. Then he went back for Korea. Then he went back for Vietnam. Then went back for Grenada, and then went back for Lebanon, always on battleships.
Amazing.
And I said, "Well, how do you find yourself over here? This battleship over here right now." We had two battleships in the Persian Gulf at that point. And he goes, "They wouldn't take me." And I said, "The only ship that would take me in my twilight tour, I only got 6 months left, was a minesweeper, and there's no way I was going to miss out." So he turned out to be my absolute all-time best sailor ever. I mean, he
Amazing. Well,
was
yeah, he knew
so
a few
squared away.
things. Yeah, of
Oh my
course.
gosh!
Of course.
So we had only small weapons on board this ship. We had 50 caliber machine guns, and we had 45 Colt pistols, and we had M14s. And also inside the weapons locker was, because one of my collateral duties was weapons officer, was these swords. And I said, "We got these decorative swords." He goes, "Those aren't swords; those are boarding cutlasses, and we're going to
Oh
be
my
trained. We're
goodness.
going to be training with them." I said, "What do you mean training with boarding cutlasses?" "Yeah, we're going to train the duty station how to use the boarding cutlasses." And so they had these World War II era instruction manuals, and they were cartoon books. They're just little cartoon books, and they were made by Disney. So the illustrators that
Amazing.
did the Disney made these books, and it basically had a picture of the junior officer, the ensign or the lieutenant JG, with a Colt 45 in one hand and the boarding cutlass in the other hand.
Amazing.
And it literally has him out of his mouth is coming and says "arg" as he's charging
It's
the
like
enemy.
Trafalgar, it's like
And, yeah,
Napoleonic era
and
boarding another ship. That's
you shoot
amazing.
your 7 rounds out of your 45. You throw the 45 down on the deck, and then you charge them with the sword. And
Amazing.
so we literally had on the fantail of the ship, every other day we rotated a different crew through, and with practicing with our boarding cutlasses.
Amazing.
And yeah, it's crazy stuff.
And this whole time, I mean, there's amazing stories, Bill. This whole time, are you maintaining interest in cars, or is that just out of your
Yeah,
brain
no,
while
no,
you're
no.
doing
I definitely was because I actually, there was a lot of really cool
because
cars
sailors
in
like
that part of the
cars.
world.
Sailors like
Oh,
muscle cars, right?
yeah.
Like,
No,
yeah,
well, there was more than that. I remember. So you couldn't get off these ships. There was just no time off. They basically
right.
were fully deployed. They were always out at sea, but they were in such bad shape that you always had to run 3 fire pumps simultaneously. They only had 3 fire pumps on board. They had to be running constantly, and they would be pumping water over the side because otherwise they just sink. They were
Yeah.
basically floating, and if the power went out and you lost a generator, you lost a pump, you were done. You would just sink. So we would have to get into port to get fresh food. There's no fresh water on board the ship, so could only carry a minimum amount of water. You were eating, basically box food. Your fresh, produce and stuff would go bad in just a couple of days. So we would pull in, you'd get resupply, you get your water. The water barge would come alongside, you reload back up again, go back out in the Persian Gulf. But it was getting to the point where it was just the living conditions were so bad on board. You were showering with had a fire pump going on the fantail for salt water showers, and the only water on board was a minimum amount of water for cooking. You really couldn't wash or clean with it. And everybody's uniform was completely tattered and falling apart, and it was just there's no washing machines on board that would work and things like that. So when we did get to go ashore, immediately the first thing I did is I went into town in Bahrain, and I became a member of one of these private clubs. And Bahrain is one of the countries that Westerners can drink, but only in certain regulated areas. And then I signed the ship for a marathon to run on a 75-kilometer marathon, international marathon. And so they went to the crew and said, okay, you guys get a day off the ship as long as you volunteer to run in this marathon. And these guys were desperate to get off the ship. So I had a whole bunch of volunteers.
They would have done anything, right?
And I had a whole bunch of my Vietnam era career sailors that were heavy smokers and way overweight. And like, are you sure you want to run in 110, 115-degree heat in a marathon? And Mr. Noon, get me off the ship. I'll do anything. And so we're supposed to have a crew, supposed to have your team supposed to have 25 members in it for this relay. And I got like 10 or 12 to volunteer for it. And so I was running the different stages, and I'd finish my, 2, 3, 4 kilometer stage. The bus would pick me up and run me to the next stage, and I get the baton. So I ran like 5 sections of this thing in the marathon. We were running against the Iraqis, the Iranians, the British, the French. I mean, it was very organized international marathon. Of course, we did miserably, but it was good to get off the ship. But it ended at this really beautiful, massive 5-star hotel that was just absolutely the most beautiful thing you've ever seen in your life. And they had food spread out everywhere, and shrimp and oysters and just crazy stuff like that. And they had this big giant pyramid of Heineken beer. And I went over after having run this thing, totally dehydrated, grabbed a beer and got about halfway through the beer and passed out. Fell right down, knocked me out so hard. A combination of the cold and not having had anything to drink for the day. It was pretty crazy stuff. But
Pretty
we got off the
amazing.
ship at least. I'll give you
Yeah, thank you.
one more quick story
Yeah, go
on
ahead.
then I'll leave from the Navy. We'll get back to the car stuff. But the if you ever saw the movie Caine Mutiny
Yeah, absolutely.
and you've seen the TV show McHale's Navy.
I've not seen that. I
Okay.
know of it, but I have
Okay,
not
so
seen it.
so if you combine the King Mutiny and McHale's Navy, that's what it was like on these ships. They were just holdbacks from a different era. They were, 50 years beyond their prime. There was nothing modern technology about them whatsoever, and the crews were challenged at best, to say the least. So I had one guy that came. We're supposed to get a new XO, executive officer, and this guy gets on board the ship, and I got my clipboard out, and I ask him his name, tells me who he is, and I said, "Oh, you're Lieutenant Commander such and such." He's an older guy, and he's looking around in a complete daze. And I'm like, "Is like everything okay?" Because I just never seen anything like this. And the Persian Gulf is just always it's like hazy, and you get gas fires and oil flares going off everywhere, and you can never see the horizon, and its visibility is just miserable. And he's just staring around. I said, "Yeah, the Persian Gulf's different than anywhere else I'm sure you've ever sailed." He goes, "No, I've never seen anything like this." I go, "What do you mean like this?" He goes, "The ocean." I go, "What do you mean? You're a lieutenant commander in the Navy. You've never seen the ocean?" He goes, I go, "What do you do?" He goes, "I'm a nuclear power instructor at Flat Rock, Idaho."
Oh,
I go,
no.
and he said the guy said I can come go to sea for the first time ever if I signed up for a minesweeper. And I said, "You've never been on a ship before?" He said, "I've never seen the ocean before."
Oh my
And
goodness.
so this guy was obviously a really good nuclear engineer teacher because he'd been there for like 26 years, 27 years. But he was the worst Navy officer in the history of the world. He knew nothing. He
Yeah.
knew nothing about how to deal with sailors, command and control, couldn't navigate out of a paper bag. It was just getting underway with him was just like having an extra anchor on the bridge. It was just
Amazing.
impossible to do anything.
You weren't kidding about how hard it was to man these ships, how hard it was to get people to go out
It
on
was
them.
different. I mean, I look back on it. I mean, yeah, I had the
What
time
an
of my life.
experience. Yeah, what an experience. That's incredible. When you were in port, when you were in Bahrain, were there any interesting cars there?
Yeah, quite a few. So, had a what I call a patron. We had a Saudi guy. The Saudi there was a causeway that connects Bahrain to the mainland. So it's a big, giant, long bridge. Like maybe 20-mile long, combination of different bridges over different islands. And so in Saudi Arabia, obviously, there's no alcohol except for the Sadiq, the home brew that they make. And so they would come over to Bahrain and drink, and of course, then they drink and drive.
Yep.
And so I had this one Saudi patron. He would drive over, and he had a brand new Testarossa. They had just come out with them, the
Whoa.
1986, 87 Testarossa. Mono Specco, one of the high mirror, single mirror
Yeah, I love
cars.
those. Yeah, uh-huh.
Because these guys had money, so they would, picture of Heineken and this pub that we're members of was like $35. And, it cost like 4 or 5 dinar, which is like equivalent of $5 each. So this guy would buy all the drinks, and he knew that I was friends with all the Gulf Air girls and the Kuwaiti Air girl, all the flight attendants from all the different airlines. I had always this flock of different pretty girlfriends that would always hang out with us at the Londoner. So he just loved to be associated with that and pay for everybody's drinks all night long. So I don't see him for like 2 weeks, and we're back there one night, and all of a sudden he comes in and he's covered in head to toe in bandages, just completely covered in bandages, and he's got two black eyes, and he's limping. I go, "What's wrong?" He goes, "The Ferrari is no more."
Uh-oh.
He had
Oh, no.
backflipped the Ferrari at the end of the
Oh,
causeway coming into Bahrain, into the estuary, into the sand and mud. I said, "I got to see this." So I got borrowed a bicycle from one of the on base places and drove out to the end of the causeway. And sure enough, it was sitting upside down. And I just remember, seeing the aluminum dry sump engine and all
oh,
the different
man.
components on it, and the shocks, and thinking, "Man, that should be recoverable." But they didn't take care of
Speak
the cars at
speaks
all.
well to the you've sold a couple Testarossas in your day, Bill. Seems like it speaks pretty well to the durability of those cars that he
Well,
survived that.
yeah, I went to one of the first places I went to when I was when after I left the Navy, I was actually went to work for the Kuwaiti government, was sailing for the Kuwaiti Oil Tanker Corporation, and that's when Desert Storm came about, and they had the invasion and freed up Kuwait, and so they wanted to have a Kuwaiti ship to be the first ship in there, even though it was an American flag ship. It was owned by the Kuwaiti government. So we took down the American flag and put the Kuwaiti flag up, and we went to what they call Steel Isle, which is in I've forgotten the name of the town, but the old Safat, the old city of Kuwait. So went ashore, and the first place I went to was the Ferrari dealership.
For
It
in
was pretty
Kuwait Ci in
in
it is
Kuwait,
in Kuwait
Kuwait,
City? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, in Safat, Kuwait, and I mean, a lot of the buildings were burnt out, and it was a really pretty deplorable area. You could see where a lot of the U.S. military strikes from aircraft had blown up Iraqi tanks and things like that, and trucks, and a lot of bodies and things like that around everywhere, and people had been in hiding for months coming out. But I went to the Ferrari dealership, and there was nothing left of the dealership. The two giant wooden doors. They had these two massive, huge wooden doors, and in the center of the Cavallino Rampante, the Ferrari, prancing horse Ferrari, was an unexploded RPG round. They had obviously fired at the doors. The Iraqis had fired at the doors, and this thing hadn't exploded. But the
Oh,
rest of the
man.
building was gone, missing. There was nothing. The rest of
Amazing.
the whole frame of the structure, all the glass, all the steel was completely gone. All that was left was the old tile floor and the burnt out remains of a bunch of different cars. But it was, I mean, the place was devastated.
Amazing. Wow, what a story. It's interesting that you had these Ferrari encounters when you were over there, and you had been a muscle car guy before that. When does the interest in, I associate you with Porsches and Ferraris and stuff. So
Well,
did you already have an interest in that, or
yeah,
it seems?
no, a little bit of everything. I was always any kind of machinery always fascinated me.
Yeah.
While I was over there, actually, I was running in what they called it was another running society called Hash House Harriers, very famous English running society where they do these rallies and tours through the desert and all over the world, and any place that's an expatriate colony. I signed up and joined one of those, and we were out doing a run one night in the as the sunset, and these guys had a what do you call it a mid-year Corvette, 63 through 67. It had Rochester fuel injection on it, and it was not running right. We were having a real problem with it, and I knew it was fuel injected because I could see the doghouse and understood what it was, but it just sounded like it was misfiring. So I looked at it, and it's basic. Obviously it's a 327 basic small block Chevrolet motor on it, but the vacuum line was off the distributor. And when I went to put the vacuum line on, the distributor moved, so I knew the distributor was loose. I said, I think I can get this thing going for you guys. I said, let's figure out where the timing is on it. So we were able to set it, got it running, not much smoother for them after that. And so they're very appreciative on it. And we exchanged contact information. They gave me their landline phone, and we had a landline phone on the pier where we tied up every once in a while. And so I called them, and they would come pick me up and showed me they took me out and saw their collection of falcons. They
Oh,
all have
wow.
these flying falcons. They go out and they go on these organized hunts.
Yeah,
And
not the car. You're talking about a
no,
falcon bird on your
falcon
arm,
bird.
right? That
Yeah, yeah.
goes and hunts for you.
Yeah, these guys
Yep.
are, and they had these beautiful parties in the desert with these, something you'd see like out of Lawrence of Arabia with all these tents and really great food and pretty girls dancing. And it was just, a lot of in different cultures, different society, but a really cool place to go visit.
Oh man, I love all that. That's a wonderful, wonderful things that you'll remember for the rest of your life. So you're over there in the early '90s, but your association with Symbolic is pretty soon after that, is it not?
Yeah, almost immediately. So I had been buying cars from they were called Vintage Motor Car Company at that point, and it was owned by Mark Chase and Bernie Chase, two brothers, and
And
they
had
had
you
been.
fallen in love with San Diego, by the way, where you wanted to be in
San
San
Diego was
Diego at that?
back then. San Diego was absolute paradise on earth. It's not
Yeah.
what it is now today. Today, it's a shell of what it used to be, which is the reason that I ended up leaving. I just couldn't watch the city just deteriorate any further. But it was back then. It was a phenomenal. So I had bought a couple of cars. I bought my first Ferrari from them was a 1976 308 GTB, white red, and then I bought a
Is that
1984
fiberglass car?
fiberglass. No, it was
Oh,
one of the first steel cars. It was a
oh,
super early.
interesting.
The chassis number was 20595, and it was probably like within the first 100 steel bodied cars. I did have a fiberglass one later, but so my first Ferrari was what was the that 308. Then I bought a 400i, and then after that, my next Ferrari was a 512BB Boxer, and then I went totally retro after that. And my next Ferrari was a 375 mm. So I went
Wow.
from opposite end of the spectrum. So I
Wow.
had these road Ferraris, and the Ferrari 308 was phenomenal. The 400i
Yeah, do
was
you know what became of that car? If you follow that a
so
very
the
early steel GTB would be my
so
dream
it's in
Ferrari.
Japan. It's still there. So it went over to Japan. It was still there as of about maybe 2 years ago. Robert Reslaf does the registry for the GTBs for the 308s, and they repainted it red. But it was as of just a few years ago. It was still over in Japan.
Oh,
It
what
was
color was it when you had it? What was the original
white,
color?
white with a red interior.
Oh,
Yeah, it was
oh, that's
beautiful,
the
beautiful car.
car,
Oh, it was a
Bill. That's about as
great car.
oh, man.
So the first Ferrari was awesome. That car was phenomenal. The second one was so, not great. And then the Boxer was horrible. The Boxer was carbureted, and the carburetors, the throttle shaft bushings were all worn out, so it bled air really badly through the throttle shaft bushings. And my quick fix on it was putting O-rings to try to seal up them so it wouldn't have the crazy high idle and it
It's
wouldn't
is it
pop.
six Webers on that?
Yeah, 6 Webers on it,
Oh,
but
man.
it had 50,000 kilometers of use on it, so the throttle shafts were completely worn out, and I didn't have the money at the time or patience to do a proper rebuild on it. And then I bought a 375 mm with borrowed money from the company. That was a really important car, and it basically put my face in the Ferrari community for the first time in a major way. And then the company was really good. They had given me, we had moved from the outdoor location up in Encinitas to an indoor location, La Jolla, and they had given me an unlimited budget to buy as many reference books as I wanted. Back then, of course, there was no internet, but I was able to buy every single book and every publication, every magazine, and that was a real start. And I was corresponding with some of the most famous historians that were around and still alive at the point. John Godfrey, Godfrey Eaton, Stan Nowak had recently just passed away. I was doing a lot of research and work with Gerald Roush from the Fry Market Letter. I had made really good friends with all the old racers, Sterling Moss and Phil Hill and Jack Brabham. I ran into Jack Brabham at an event in Elkhart Lake, and he was really
Was that with the
helpful.
375 mm?
No, the 375 we only had for a short period of time. I,
Oh,
I owed
okay.
everybody in the world money on the car, and so the company ended up selling it. Ended up going to Bruce McCaw. He still has it. He did a beautiful, proper restoration on it. But the car had been missing for 40 years. Everybody thought the car had no longer existed. The stories were that it had been burnt, that the guy had sunk it in the lake. He was a homeless guy that had it and had a troubled, hard life. And we just recently, in Bring a Trailer, we had one of the bronzes of that car called Fast Company by Stanley Wanless, put it up for sale on there, and shared a lot of the stories and all the reminiscence of all the different things that happened with that car and how it became beautifully restored. Went from being $1 million car when we bought it, a little over $1 million, to being today it's probably a 40, 45, maybe $50 million
Wow.
car. Very, very special.
Were you racing, Bill? Were you racing any of
I'm
these
doing a
cars?
lot of racing. So that came along about 97, 96, 97 timeframe. We had always been going to the different events, Catalina Classics, and the different shows and races all over the place. Up in Coronado had started racing the Coronado Historic Races, and they had them up in Laguna Seca and Sears Point and the old what was the airfield, Tustin, California, the old Marine Corps Air Base. So the owner of the company, we had a dozen Ferraris, cool vintage racing Ferraris, down at Catalina Classics one year, and everybody else is out racing their cars around. And the owner of the company came over to me, and says, why aren't our cars out on the track? And I said, well, I don't have anybody that can drive them. I haven't sold them. He goes, no, I want to see our cars go around the track. You take one of them out. I said, I don't know anything about racing. And he goes, well, just go out and drive it. So I did. I went out on the track. I'd never been on a racetrack before in my life, and went out, and first one was a 750 Monza, then a 500 Mondial, and then a TRC. So three different four-cylinder Ferraris, and that was fun. And then the next day, I drove an SWB alloy, a competition car, and then pretty quickly after that, a lot of my clients that had been buying the cars that weren't racing them, they said, would you, take my Testarossa around the track? Would you do this? So I sold a client a 250 Testarossa, and he was supposed to do the Colorado Grand with me in it, and he had an accident, close his garage door on himself or something, that hurt himself, so he couldn't go. And he said, just take it and send me pictures. So I took my wife, and we went and did the Colorado Grand and the 250
Amazing.
Testarossa, and that was fantastic.
Yeah.
And then really started getting seriously into the racing. But I really didn't have, I was playing with all these millionaire and billionaires with their cars on the tracks, but that's not the my wealth was fraction pennies. They would
Right.
reach into their pockets, and hundreds of thousands of dollars would come out, and I would reach in my pockets and the pennies would come out. And so
Yeah,
I
yeah,
had to be
sure.
really careful with
Yeah.
the vehicles to drive. And so I did have some really good clients that would give me, one client gave me a 250 LM to race for a whole season.
Wow.
Another one gave me his GTO for 2 years to race, and
Wow.
used to take my
Are those
kids
the
to school. And
standouts? What stands out as the
I
most
mean, all
the
of them.
mo
I mean,
Oh, yeah.
some of the pre-war Alphas were amazing. The Bugattis, but
Do you
some of
drive any
the
of the ones where the drive shaft goes between your legs,
yeah,
those
well,
cars?
actually, it splits between on the P3 Alphas.
That's right, it
It's
splits
a
out. They're half
splits out,
shafts, right? Yeah.
which was it was the idea was like supposed to give the lower center of gravity for the driver, but it was more of an intimidating factor that they said, oh, this will look really cool, and the competition won't know what we're doing next, to see a car with two differentials on it. But they're
Yeah.
great cars to drive. So one year we had a client. We had at one point we had seven of the surviving 10 P3 Alphas. We had sold one to a client, and he was having a hard time selling. He said, "Well, take this car to the next race where it's eligible to race, and race it." And this thing ran on methanol. So it was a Ferrari Store Challenge race weekend up at Sears Point. It would have been in the late
And they're a
'90s.
supercharged straight
Yeah,
8, is that
twin
right, Bill?
supercharged, twin
Twin
supercharged.
supercharged, that's right.
They had 2.8 to 3.5 liter engines, twin cam inline 8-cylinder engines, and they made like 375, 400 horsepower, and they weighed nothing, absolutely nothing. So this one was had a solid front axle. Some of them had Dubonnet independent front suspensions, which were great at really high speed if you want to go 180 miles an hour. But there's no roll bar in these cars, and there's no seatbelts. So you're the roll bar if things go wrong. And the idea is you want to get checked out of the car so you don't wear any seatbelts. So I signed up to run this thing at this Ferrari Challenge race. And back then we would get, there would be challenge cars like the 355 challenge cars, 360 challenge cars. There would be 50, 60 of those guys in a race weekend out in the cars. And the drum brake class, we'd have 25, 30 cars. And in the disc brake class, 25, 30 cars. So the first session they had was a open session. Anybody could go anytime they wanted, 30-minute session, go take your car out. So I had 50 liters of methanol to run the whole weekend, which is not a lot. Methanol goes quick.
Yeah.
So I did the first open session. I figured I'll just get a couple laps in, and then I'll wait for the qualifying laps in the drum brake class, and then I'll do the race in the drum brake class, and I'll just do a few of the qualifying laps, and I'll have enough fuel to finish the race. So I go out in the practice session, and it wasn't that I was that talented. It's just the car was just so overly, I mean, so good. They were just amazing machines. That what they were capable of doing. So I went out at Sears Point. If you've ever been there, it's a great track. It's up in Napa Valley,
Yep.
California. I think it's
I'm in our headquarters here in San
yeah.
Francisco, so
So
I'm in Northern Cali. Yeah, yeah.
is it called Infineon now or something like that?
I think that I was Infineon at some point. I still call it Sears Point.
Sears, everything everybody.
Yeah,
So anyway,
yeah,
so I
right.
get out there at Sears Point in this thing, and had to let all the corner workers were all notified that I had methanol, because if it catches on fire, you can't see it, and you got to, you get out and you make sure you got no flames on you. But anyway, we never had any fire problems. So I'm driving this thing around, and after like the second lap, I realized that I can out accelerate going up into the hill, and then at the bottom of the hill, all the way to the what they call the bottleneck at the end, and all the way down the back straight. That there's nobody that could overtake me. I could pass every single car on the track, all of the disc brake Ferraris and all of the 355 Challenge and the 360
Wow.
Challenge cars. And the only thing they could do was they could outturn me. They could outbrake and outturn me, mercilessly outbrake me, and they could definitely outturn me and some of the tight turns on it. But you could really, these P3s will just drift like you wouldn't believe. You put opposite lock on,
Wow.
you stand on the throttle. They only have 3 speeds gearboxes. They have 4 speed gearboxes, but you only get to use 3 of the gears. The first gear is blocked off. So you're not really changing gears that often. You get it up in the second gear, and on the big straights, you just use third gear. And the torque of the motors of these things from 3,000 RPM to 6,000 RPM is just explosive. It just, it's linear. So I was passing all these 360 challenge cars, and these guys were just like freaking out, saying that to them it looks like a Model T going by.
Totally. Yeah.
And then I came into the pits, and we go to the first drivers meeting, and they make the announcement. They said, "Now, if you when driving the different classes of the cars, make sure you keep your braking zones in mind. That the older drum brake cars don't brake with the disc brake cars, and the disc brake cars can't brake with the modern 360s." And then afterwards, the organized event came over, and it goes, "And Bill, we don't want you driving with the 355, 360 cars anymore." I go, "I'm staying away from them." He says, "No, no, that's not the point. It's embarrassing. We're trying to get these guys to buy more of these cars. They'll sell 350, $400,000 of consumables in a weekend to these guys. And, we want them being enthusiastic, and you going out driving around in this, 70-year-old car, that's not helping us with the selling consumables and replacing the cars that they crash." So that was the end of that. So I just did the drum brake sessions on it. But this thing was just ridiculously over competitive.
Wow, that is fantastic. Those are beautiful. Every time I see those
Well,
cars, they're
I
so
was
beautiful.
driving another one. We had a beautiful 2.9 Alpha and AC 2900. Again, twin supercharged, big inline twin cam 8-cylinder engine. I was driving that at Cavallino Classics and the morning session, and was just having the time of my life. And it was just a phenomenal car. And that thing would just run right up there with the 250 Testarossas, run down the TDFs and all the fast Ferraris, the drum brake Ferraris. And so the session was over, and they wanted me to do a lunchtime session and I just bought and sold Gianpiero Moretti 333 SP Ferrari, and they wanted me to drive it in a lunchtime parade session because there very few of those had gone into private hands at that point. And I said, "Sure." So I get in this thing, and I start this thing up. It's a sequential shifter, and I pull out of the pits, and I'm going out on the track, and I come to turn two is basically just a small little kink, and I hit the brake pedal and stopped the car on the track. Cool, just comes to a complete stop, and stalled it right out. Because I went from being in this drum brake car where you just stood with all your might, center throttle and the brake pedals on the right, and you stand with all your might on the brake pedal as you troll brake through the turns, to getting into a car that has the best brakes and any racer ever had in its life. And I just tapped the brake pedal and the thing comes to a complete stop. And so, get the thing restarted, and I'm going back around, and I pull in afterwards, and they're like, "What happened on the first lap?" I said, "Yeah, I forgot I was in a disc brake car that
Yeah,
knows
yeah,
what
yeah, a
it's
little
doing
different,
on it."
little different.
But
And
yeah, no, it was a
and
lot of
Bill, were
fun.
you I mean, that's incredible. We could talk Ferraris all day long, but were you, buying and selling other cars? Do you have other interests, or were you pretty focused on Ferraris at this era?
Well, I mean, anything that was profitable, but
Yep.
the main focus of the company was on obviously making money, but also going after what we were enthusiastic about. And so they really unloaded the taps on me and let me do whatever I wanted to do. They gave me permission to go out and hunt down and buy. So I basically annoyed every single GTO owner, every 250 Testarossa owner, every 250 LM owner that would even listen to me, trying to get them to free up their cars to sell the cars. And a lot of these guys had had the cars for 10, 15, 20 years. They bought them back when they were, in the early 80s, late 70s, when they really didn't have the values that they did. The market had already come and peaked in 89. And so the guys that still were holding on to them were, getting used to the idea of the prices, stabilizing and going back up in the other direction again. I had been trying to get Stan Ross out of Ohio to sell his 250 Testarossa. He had the old Bob Fergus 250 Testarossa, 0748 TR, and to sell it, and he wouldn't sell it. And then one day I had the Le Mans winning 962 Porsche, and I knew that he loved the car. So I had a 143rd scale model of it, and I put it in a FedEx envelope and I sent it to him. And the next day he called me back up. He goes, "Okay, what's this for?" He goes, "Because I got the Le Mans winning 962." And he goes, "Okay, I guess we're gonna be trading on the Testarossa." So I traded him even for the Testarossa. And
Amazing.
yeah, so finally had our first Testarossa and I wanted one for so bad, a 250 Testarossa. And literally a week later, Adrian Hamilton sold us another 250 Testarossa. So now we had two in the showroom.
You had them both at the same
Yeah,
time?
both at the same time. So people would come, and it was really rare to see, one of these, cars that were, I guess, were 18 of them built, to come in and see them. Two at the same time was a fluke. And people were like, "What, are you making these things in your backyard? And what's the deal with these things?" And but we had a lot of times things like that. They made three of these GT40 Gulf Le Mans lightweights. They had one that won the Le Mans twice, and then they had two others. And so we owned the other two cars. And I
Wow.
was actually in Connecticut trying to
These are
make
the
a deal.
wire cars, the
Yeah,
independent
yep,
cars, right?
yep, yep,
Yep.
yep. And so we're trying to find a Daytona. And the guy said, "Well, you should look at this GT40." It was the double Le Mans winner. And I called up the company. I said, "Oh, they have the double Le Mans winner here." And the previous owner, Peter Lavanos, had paid $10 million for it, unheard of money, like the world record at the time for their. Actually, I was thinking it was like $5 million in like 1989, and he was willing to sell it for $1 million. And
Whoa.
we didn't buy it. We didn't buy it. Rob,
Oh,
Rob Walton ended up buying. He still has it. So Rob bought it, and then we had the other two GT40 lightweights, and then we
is
had
that the
two.
only car is that the only chassis to ever win twice at Le Mans? Do you
It
know?
was then, but now I think there's a Courage that's done it twice,
Okay.
Courage Porsche that did it in
Yep.
the 1990s. Some of the more modern historian guys would know better, but I believe a
Yeah.
Courage has won it twice now. Then we had two of the Cobra Daytona coupes out of the six that were built. Having two of those
Oh,
at the same
wow.
time was kind of weird. And back then, I was doing a lot of TV shows. I was working with Alan de Cadenet. I did a lot of stuff with him, and also Edward Herman. Remember him? From
Uh-huh,
Pebble
yeah.
Beach and all that. He did a bunch of beautiful TV shows and movies. He was in Overboard with Goldie Hawn and things like that. He was her husband, and really great actor. But he was also a really cool car enthusiast. And I
Wow.
did a whole bunch. I did a bunch of shows, and they kept recycling these shows over and over and over again. They would, one of the series is called $1 Million Automobiles, and then they'd recut it and re-edit it and become like a Eye on the Classics, and they just kept and they would and rerun these things on the different History Channel and the Learning Channel, all these different networks back in the 90s and into the early 2000s over and over again. And I'd go to like car shows and car events and races, and I'd have girls and these teenage boys come up to me and goes, "Oh, you're Bill Noon. I saw you on such and such, and you were driving this 250 LM." And they was like, "Oh, give me an autograph," and things like that. I said, really, you really care about these things like that? And I took a lot of these young kids out for drives and some of these cars and Testarossas, GTOs, things like that.
Mhm.
And some of them years later would become clients, bought cars from me.
Oh, that's great. That's
The
fantastic.
crazy that come around in a full circle. So this one I only have a few handful of female clients, and she can end up coming back to me years later and bought a 250 SWB for me. She had taken her
Wow.
out in a GTO, and so and she tried to get her husband interested in doing like rallies and tours, and he was not into it. So she takes this thing on the Tour Auto, the old Tour de France, all the time, and goes with their different girlfriends and has the time of her life with it.
Do you find that's the case still today when you take some of these amazing cars that you're listing now out? Do kids still get excited about cars
Yeah,
in the same way?
it's surprising. They really they you never know what the generational divide will be, But I don't get to do the racing like I used to. I mean, I can't remember the last time I really hardcore raced, but probably in the 2007, 2008, maybe at Coronado or something like that before that one went away. But when I photograph and video the cars, it doesn't matter if I'm doing it here locally in New Hampshire in my own hometown, if I'm doing it back in California. You get interesting people pulling over to the side of the road, and I try to go to these spots that are kind of out of the way, and make it so it looks like the car is someplace cool. I got this great little spot in San Diego that's near the
Is that the one where
Airport.
every once in a while I see jet F-18s in the
Yes,
background of
yeah,
your
yeah.
pictures? Yeah, uh-huh.
And it looks like the one half of a high bank track. It looks like
Yep,
you're
yeah,
racing at
I love
Mulberry
that
or
spot.
so.
Uh-huh.
It's a great place to photograph. And I get people pulling off the highway, and I said, "Oh, I seen your YouTube channel. I seen all your cars, and I follow you and bring a trailer, and because can it's okay take a picture of myself in front of your car?" And I always give out cards to these people, and they follow the auction. So I got now, my database and all these people that follow the auctions is huge, but they're never going to buy a car. They're just really super enthusiastic. They're not the buyers of the vehicles. They're just really enthusiastic.
Yeah, well, we love that obviously because Bring a Trailer's a community and you're, one of the fan favorites because of the storytelling. I mean, everyone's getting a taste of it here with your stories on the podcast, but does that I mean, for us that's a amazing thing, right? In fact, I would argue our success is based on the fact that so many people who aren't necessarily buyers and sellers who are just interested in the cars are on the auction listings, asking
The
questions and getting excited about the cars and
the
you seem
enthusiasm
to enjoy
level.
that. You
Oh
seem to
no,
enjoy that, Bill.
absolutely. The enthusiasm level is off the charts with Bring a Trailer. There's no other venue that is even remotely close to it. I mean, you get people fairly excited at a Mecum auction, at a Gooding auction, at an RM auction, Sotheby's, at a bottom sale. There's a lot of passion goes on, and it's so quick and so momentary. A really long and involved sale is 5 or 6 minutes long, and most of the cars get 1 minute in the sun, and then it's over. And you obviously get to do your due diligence beforehand, but a lot of those sales at those auctions are made in a momentary passion type thing.
Yeah.
You see something go across the block. I did it myself yesterday. I've been watching every tractor that goes up for sale and Bring a Trailer, wanting one desperately for my farm, but not really having the budget to be able to do it right now. And I've got a barn full of my own cars in my own family collection, and I don't get to use them anywhere near as much. And so trying to justify buying a $50,000 Porsche tractor is just not going to go over well with my wife.
Right.
So
Right.
this thing was on Bring a Trailer yesterday, and it just punched all the tickets. And I didn't do any bidding on it at all. I didn't ask any questions. And literally in the last 60 seconds of the auction, I made one bid and won it. And I
Amazing.
think I wrote down Yahoo! Finally got a tractor for my own farm, so I can do some tractoring.
Have you already
And
chatted with the seller, Bill?
oh, he's been phenomenal. We've been so lucky in Bring a Trailer. We never had anybody that we bought a car from ever go south on us, and we've only had one guy, one dealer who bought a Porsche from us on behalf of a client who went south on us out of whatever out of the 3 accounts that I've had on Bring a Trailer. I think we've had 300 plus sales. So only one dealer ever went south. But I was so afraid that this guy selling this tractor for $2,000, and it's probably at least a $7,000, $8,000 tractor. I think, oh, he's going to be really upset, really angry. He's so nice. He was, I emailed him immediately within 30 seconds of the auction being over. And I said, let me know how you want to be paid, how quickly you want to be paid, what I can do to help make it easy for you. And he emailed back. He goes, congratulations. That was a really nice buy. You really did good.
I'm excited for you about that tractor, Bill.
I am. Me
Do
too.
you I
Doing a lot.
bet.
I'm going to be doing a lot of tractoring.
That's fantastic. I'm definitely jealous of that. How did you find out about Bring a Trailer? What got you onto the site in the first place?
Well, Gentry and Randy had been in touch with me. I had a really strange Volkswagen, '68 Volkswagen pickup truck. It was originally a 3-door pickup truck, and somebody had bought a fourth door from a wrecked one out of Australia. So the way they do the Volkswagen pickup trucks, depending on the market where it's sold, passenger door on the rear will be on the opposite side from the steering wheel. So this was a right-hand drive Australian sold pickup truck, so it had an extra passenger door on the left hand side. So this guy bought the door, restored this thing, and he put 4 doors into it. And there's no four
Interesting.
door Volkswagen pickup truck. So I drove this thing everywhere, all over San Diego all the time. It's my daily driver. And somebody snapped a picture of it, and they put a card on my windshield that said, "You're going to be featured on Bring a Trailer." And I went there, and I probably spent like 2 hours going through all of their old previous featured vehicles. They weren't doing any sales. It was just all fun and stuff that these guys had been listing, all these interesting cars that you could never drive home. You had to bring them home on a trailer, and vehicles that you could drive, but they were just interesting vehicles. And I don't know if I reached out to them or they reached out to me after my Volkswagen was photographed there. And they were getting back then, like 30, 40,000 hits a day. And that was pretty crazy for a car website. Nobody was doing that. Not even like Ferrari's, factory website was just all the stuff was pretty brand new stuff. And I begged and pleaded with them to let me sell cars on this, advertise my cars on their website. And then where things really came to a head was at some point I'd have to go back and look and see. I had a client gave me a totally derelict ISO Grifo to sell. This thing it was a basically single owner from new. There's a sergeant in the Air Force had bought it on base in Germany when he was stationed over there. When he left the Air Force, he retired to Stockton, California, and he parked it in his garage in a really bad neighborhood and died. And they left it to his daughter. And his daughter saw one of my friends listed, I buy cars for cash. And she called him up and she said, I have an ISO Grifo. and, and he goes, okay, I know what it is. And he got the address and went to go see it. And it was like, he said, the taxi would not drive him to this neighborhood. It was in such a bad neighborhood. So he gets there and he's got cash in hand to buy this thing. And they opened up the garage door and it hadn't been touched in years. And it had shag carpeting on the dash and the floors. And it was totally derelict, but it was not rusty. Still had its original engine. It was in, pretty rough shape. So he sent it to us. We got it running and driving. And it basically had one tail light that worked, no turn signals, oil pressure gauge worked, the speedometer didn't work, nothing else worked on it. But it turned out to be like the 35th ISO Grifo built.
Oh my God.
Really early car with all these crazy early features. And I took it to Monterey. And back then, what I would do is I would always take one really cool old clunker and I'd park it right in front of the Portola Plaza Hotel. Back then, it was called the Doubletree Hotel. And I'd go down to the meter maid office and I'd prepay my parking tickets for the whole weekend in advance. I'd go down and knock on the door and I'd say, I'm going to park right here in front of Starbucks for the next 3 days. How much I owe you? And she'd be like, oh, it's $270. If I had parked in the parking garage, it would have been like $400 for the weekend. So on Monterey weekend. So it was cheaper to just to leave the car on the side of the road and prepay the parking tickets on it. So everybody in the world was sending photos to bring a trailer of the car, and Bring a Trailer featured the vehicle. And I think Randy asked me, goes, these guys are begging to get your contact details. I said, oh, give it to them, give them my phone number, give them my email. And the ISO Grifo Worldwide Club has had their reunion that weekend in Monterey.
Oh, wow.
So they were, and the German contingent was like 150 of these guys were there, and they went crazy over this thing. They were looking through this thing, and they were taking photos, and they were looking underneath, upside down, at all the louvers on the back of the car, and every louver's got the little body number on it, and
Uh-huh.
looking at the original engine and all the date codes, and they were going crazy on this thing. So this thing should have been, back then it should have been like $100,000-ish car. It needed full restoration. I mean, didn't have any rust, but it was completely worn out. The engine had barely compression, and it was just ludicrous. And we ended up selling it before the weekend was over, like $150,000. And the guy
Amazing.
in Germany just thought he had gotten, won the lottery getting this thing.
Sure.
And so Randy and Gentry, they said, oh, they came back to me a couple weeks later. I said, we're thinking about doing, some kind of sales on the site. And they said to me, the biggest mistake I probably ever made in my modern life. And I said, oh, wait, what are you gonna do? He goes, we're thinking about running and doing it as an auction. And I said, oh, that'll never work. How are you going to compete against Gooding and RM and Bonham and all these
Oh,
organized
God.
auction houses? I've never been so wrong in my entire life. I was so humbled that within 10 years they had just become the industry standard of how to do it and how to do it right and well and make everybody happy. It was
Yeah.
amazing, and the success was just phenomenal. But I never saw it. I never would have in a million years imagine, transition like that. And then I saw the death throes of how bad it was when all the other auction companies decided at the last minute during COVID to try to switch to online formats, and they just struggled, and it just didn't have the cohesive energy and the following that gets people like what's that guy Boa Boys out of Australia or
Oh,
New
yeah, we've
Zealand,
got all these guys.
like
Yep, right. Yep.
85,000 thumbs
Uh-huh.
up. The guy comments
Yep.
on every auction 50
Yep.
times. And the guy's like the biggest cheerleader in the world for Bring
Yeah.
a Trailer. And there's like a dozen of those guys
Yeah,
that
there
follow
sure
every
are.
auction. I don't know what their day jobs are, but obviously they're not making much money at it.
Yeah, we wonder sometimes too. It's back to what I said earlier. I think the success is so much related to having a community, people who really want to watch this stuff. But that's a two-way street, and it takes sellers like you, Bill, who want to tell the story of these cars and who want to get all the information out there. And we care so much about, telling the story of the cars, and, we don't try to hype them up. We don't try to say anything about them that's not truthful, and kind of the story. Let the cars speak for themselves. And you're a master of that. Talk to me a little bit about how you've kind of developed your communication style.
Nobody's made more mistakes doing this stuff over the past 30 years than me. I mean, I've anything that you could think could go wrong, I've invented it twice. And every time I think I know something about a vehicle, I completely unlearn everything I ever learned because I knew nothing. But I've also learned to be really attentive to what people are asking, how they're asking.
Mhm.
It's fairly obvious when you've got somebody that's knowledgeable, but he's a time waster. But you don't treat him like that. You treat him as somebody that's going to contribute because he's not going to bid on the car. He's not a time waster in that way. He's a time
Yeah, but
waster
somebody
because
who is gonna bid might read what you where you
exactly he's going to
right,
he's going to listen to this guy and pay attention to it. And besides the fact that a lot of times I don't know the answer myself.
right.
So these guys are, I mean, and I'll tell them, and I always encourage them to use the contact seller button, especially with somebody that I
Mhm.
haven't worked with before. And I do that because I want these guys' knowledge. I want them to know that I really appreciate that. And I said to them, I said, I know you're not going to bid on the auction. And I'm not treating you as a time waster as from that point of view. I'm treating you as a valued asset that's going to help me educate
Yep.
me on something that I don't know about. So, I mean, like I just recently had an SCRS Porsche that we had up over the weekend. Very, very special Porsche. And it didn't make reserve. But the knowledge that I learned from starting about 6 months ago about these vehicles. Now, we previously had two of these cars. We bought two of these things from Mr. Matsuda back in the early 90s when we broke up his museum collection. And I thought I knew everything in the world about these SCRSs. I mean, obviously, we had two that came to our hands. Who would not know better than me, having had them before? I knew nothing. I absolutely knew nothing. I went through the first starting getting all the documents and paperwork from the owner. I realized that one of the cars that we got from Mr. Matsuda wasn't even an original car. It was a clone that had
Oh,
been
interesting.
built up in period using all the original parts from one of the original cars because they got worn out from racing. And so I realized, I said, well, I thought all these things were, perfect. It's kind of like, every 250 GTO in 89, 1990, every 250 GTO was perfect. It had the original body, original engine, original chassis. It had the perfect story. No bad things that ever happened to a GTO. And then it turns out, 15 years later, 20 years later, most of them have been rebodied. Most of them have a different
Yep.
engine. Some of them have a different frame. One of them killed a guy, and on
Yep.
and on and on. And they're not the virgins that you want to think of. I had
Mhm.
clients in the 90s that would ask me for the impossible car. They would ask me for Enzo Ferrari personal race car that he dated his girlfriend in, and his Piero Ferrari was born in the back seat. And I said, it doesn't exist.
Yep.
Everything's going to be a compromise. Pick something different.
Yep.
So that car that's like that doesn't exist. But over time, I learned that the imperfections properly disclosed are the key to getting
Absolutely.
getting the right way and information out there. And the other thing is, what always troubled me, because like I said, I'm a buyer and bring a trailer as well.
Right, you
I
wanna
think,
try and you wanna trust the seller, right?
yeah,
You wanna
yeah.
trust the person you're buying from.
And whenever there's an issue or problem, like I love it. Just recently, Mark Hyman, a guy that I really respect, he had a beautiful C-type replica. I think it was a Proteus. And immediately he noticed he had a problem with the car. There was something wrong with the clutch on it, and he immediately discloses that there's a problem with the car. We're letting BAT know. We're going to get this thing fixed and corrected, and we'll
Yep.
be back when it's taken care of. I love it when a seller does something like that. We always want to be one of the main focus that we always come up with is immediately when we get a car that we're going to sell. If about half of our cars we sell are consignment sales, half of the cars that we own
Yeah, sure.
ourselves. But no matter what vehicle it is, the first thing we do is we send it right out to usually to one or two guys. But my main guy that I send it to is a guy named James Millar. He owns Eli's Foreign Auto in San Diego, one of the old time school mechanics, been around for 50 years. And I mean, it said, it's going to go to bring a trailer. We want full safety check, full service verification, fluids filters, compression check. If there's something that's wrong, we want to be the ones to disclose it. And I always, when I do the submission, I always say, so far, we haven't found anything wrong, but if we find anything wrong later, we're going to be the first ones going to talk about it. And I think there's the comfort with the screeners at BAT, when they see that we're going to be the first ones that are going to disclose something. It's not going to be a surprise.
Yeah.
So years ago, we had an E-Tech Jaguar, and we paid a lot of money for the Series 1 E-Tech Jaguar. Gorgeous looking car, beautiful. Bought the Series E-Tech Jaguar, had what we believed was the full history of the car. And I think we paid like 170, $180,000 for this thing, and we're hoping to get 200 if we're going to be lucky. But it was a good looking car. And so as the auction went along, and I photographed the daylights out of the car, and I know E-types fairly well. So I photographed the subframe number, I photographed the body number, photographed the engine number, cylinder head number, the block number, photographed all the details, all the different things on the car. Probably 300 photos, and goes it. And immediately people keep saying that subframe's from a different car, the body is from a different car, that engine's from a different car. And I go, okay, let me know what I need to get for it. And I would get more photos and these things like that. And I said, I thought I knew everything about E-types. I had probably 100 of them come and go through our hands. And so I said, this thing is a disaster. The car runs and drives phenomenal. It's beautiful, but it's basically a Franken car. It's got three different
That's been
identities.
put together out of different,
Yeah,
yeah,
the
sure,
three,
yeah.
three, subframe is from one E-type, body is from another E-type, engine and drivetrain and gearbox from another E-type. So
Which, by the way, a lot of these old restored cars are that way,
it can
right?
be. I mean,
Yeah,
I'd never had one before on an E-type. I mean, I've had one with wrong engines, but never, combination of three. That had been so beautifully restored. So
sure.
our recourse was zero. We'd bought the thing. There's no way we were going to be able to unwind the deal with the guy that we bought it from. It's months later. So I went back to my Batgirl and I told her what was wrong with the car. I said, do you want to just withdraw it? And she says, no, just tell everybody what's wrong with it. And what do you want to do about the reserve? I said, well, let me check with the company. He said, well, just take the reserve off. So we went back and we said, here's what's wrong with the car. All these people helped us out, get the story right. And anybody that made a bid, if you want to retract your bid, bring a trouble, we'll take your bid back. And nobody retracted their bid. Bidding was at at that point, like 70 grand, 80 grand. And all of the people that had pointed out all things that were wrong with it, they all said these nice things. Oh, the seller he did the right thing. He's disclosed everything. And this is a great running, driving Series 1 E-type that's going to sell for a fraction of what it would cost to buy a photo restored one that doesn't have any issues that you'd feel real guilty about driving on. And I think it sold for like 100 grand, maybe 110 grand. We lost a lot of money on it. But we made a really happy client out of the guy that bought it. And all the underbidders, like, if you get another one like that, let me know about it. And I said, well, if we get another one like that, it's going to be on Bring a Trailer. So, because I don't know if everybody realizes it, but 100% of our sales go to Bring a Trailer. We don't do any showroom sales anymore.
Amazing. Well, we love having you on the platform, Bill, and everything you just pointed out is why you're a fan favorite too, right? I mean, that's the mix that I think a lot of places get wrong is it's like just don't BS, just say the truth about the car and give as much rich information as you can, but be straightforward about it. That's what somebody wants, especially when it's online, right? And
Yeah, no, exactly. I'm dealing with
it's
that one.
almost counterintuitive, right? The more honest you are about flaws and issues, the more people are confident to bid on it,
Yeah, I
right?
know. I have got one of those right now. Last week, I was just photographing a Mini Cooper pickup truck, and again, I've had a lot of Mini Coopers. I love them. I raced one over in the Tour de France one year, and love the Mark One 1275 GT cars. And so I didn't even know they made a Mini Cooper pickup truck. I had thought of this thing. I thought it was going to be a conversion from one of those little van things, something like that. So we get this thing, and it's not without its flaws. It's got some issues on it. So it's going to be submitted, bring a trailer, no reserve. We'll disclose all the issues with it. It's wicked fun to drive. I mean, it's just like
I
an absolute
bet.
full on hoot. First of all, it's way too quick for what it should be. It's got real Cooper wheels on it. It's got these big giant wide tires on it. So it's got a lot of
What's
eyeball.
is it a 1275? What's
No,
the
it's a 1090 cc, like 1100 cc.
10, yeah, okay,
Like
1098,
81.
I think is what they, yeah,
Yeah,
right,
it's
uh-huh.
1098.
Yeah, right.
So, and it photographed really well. I took it up to Lake Miramar and photographed alongside the
Oh, great.
reservoir, and then took it out to that place by the Marine Corps station. But I'm going through the previous. So we got it in trade from a long term client of ours. We allowed quite a bit more money than it's probably going to be selling for. So I go back and I start doing the research, and I found the place that he buys it in the UK. And the first thing it says, we're out of business.
No,
We closed the
no.
business. And I'm looking through the old notes, and this guy is talking about this thing like this is like perfectly restored and rust free, and all this is perfect. And there's only 100 of these things left in the world, and it turns out they made 56,000 of them in different variations. I'm pretty sure there's more than 100 of them left.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to provide the link that anybody wants to see the auction, how the previous owner bought it
Yep.
and who never got it running. The whole
Yep.
time he had it, it was never running. So we got it running and driving nicely, and sent it out to have everything taken care of. But again, it's just not without its faults and flaws, but they will be fully disclosed. Nobody's going to be
Well, that
surprised by what they're getting.
there you go. There you go. I mean, It's fascinating to me when you read some of those descriptions, the way people talk about cars. And it's like, man, that's not going to convince, that's not going to get anyone confident about a car when you're saying a bunch of baloney about it.
Well,
So
do you remember the Porsche that was up for sale maybe a year and a half ago, and they called it the all-time worst sold vehicle on, or not sold on. It had originally gone to Pecan Market. It was a
I don't
very
remember. No, which one? You've had so many great
oh,
Porsches, Mel.
this
I
is
can't.
this was a really it was a 993 turbo before they came out with the Turbo S's. It's a German. So this very very wealthy guy in Germany
Oh,
ordered
this
up.
was the really late 930. Is that
Yes.
right?
No, no, no,
Yes. Okay.
993 turbo. It was a
It was a
97
993.
993
Oh, okay.
Turbo S.
Okay.
Not Turbo S, it was a turbo, but he had
Okay.
ordered it up configured. So he basically it was almost twice the price of a regular turbo, and it had more crazy features than any of the Turbo S's. And it took 6 months to build. It was built over in the client service department.
This was like a special, kind of a
It's
special
totally
build.
totally crazy. I mean, it
Yeah.
was a ludicrous engine, and had all these. And the guy had all these non-conforming options on the car, and he just basically paid. And I have the original private assembly notes for the car, and they
Oh,
actually
amazing.
one of the assembly notes in German it said for the option code for non-conforming this racing gearbox that he wanted in the car, and it said something to the fact that yes, it's non-conforming, but the customer's an idiot. We're going to charge him for it anyway, and we're going to put it into the car. And they insulted this guy, but they just took his money and they kept configuring. So this poor seller puts this thing up and bring a trailer while it's still in the UK. It's not in the States, so it didn't have any duty or taxes paid. That's not the way to kind of be able to sell the car because it still
Right.
can't come in yet. And he starts arguing with everybody
Oh,
about
that's
the
the
car.
worst.
He starts arguing. And he says, "You
Oh,
people are
man.
not intelligent enough to understand how important this car is," and things like that. Then he asks me, contacts me, and he asks for help. So somebody bring a trailer said, if you want to know how to run your auction, look at the sales from Bill Noon and Symbolic International and how they deal with it. So he contacts me and he says, "I need some help with my auction." And he points me to the car. And he said, "Oh, I've been watching this one." I said, "Yeah, it's not going well." And I go, and then everybody says at this point you should just give up and withdraw the car or something like that. So it was just a miserable sale. So we bought the car. We bought the car and imported it, and then spent the next 6 months and like $140,000 correcting all of the problems and issues, putting the original wheels back on the car, putting the original rear tail on the car, the original rear deck lid, correcting all the issues, all the faults, all the cosmetic issues, doing everything. And then went and did full disclosure and completely of everything that was wrong, all the receipts of everything, all the comments previously addressed, everybody contacted everybody that I had contact details from the previous auction, and everybody came back and said, "This is actually a really cool car that was
Yep.
just horribly described and misunderstood previously." We still ended up losing like $75,000 on the car. We did not make, and we lost a lot of money on it, but made the new owner fantastically happy. And then, of
Yep.
course, all the underbidders are like, "You get something else like this, let me know." And I
Yep.
was the response
Yep.
is, "You'll see it on Bring a Trailer, just like everybody else. We'll make sure you get the email that it's already live and ready to go."
Oh, man, when people start arguing, with the commenters, it's always so tough. We always try to reel them back in, I understand how tough it is to hear people say things about your car, but once you get into an aggressive back and forth, it's, not good
Well,
stuff, right?
there's a time and place for that, but you need to tread lightly. So I always
Yes,
tell
and also
people,
you better know damn well that you're right, because a lot of people don't quite know they're arguing when they shouldn't be, when they don't, when the commenter might actually be right and they
yeah,
might
no,
be
no,
wrong.
absolutely. And a lot of
Yeah.
times, so there's three ways that it happens. You get first of all, you get one where somebody gets really emotional and gets angry. Then you get somebody that's knowledgeable, gets emotional, gets angry because the car is not misdescribed or something's not been disclosed, or you get a combination of all three. So in the past, I've had a few people, and I always say, I said, that's interesting that you point that out. I'm going to check on that for you, or I'll find out for you. Or if I already had the answer, I said, I did look into that, and here's what we found. Here's the
Yep.
information, and 99% of the time it'll diffuse the situation. So a
Yep.
lot of time they'll come back and said, I really appreciate you posting it. That's correct. I see how you've got that, figured that out, got the information, and I saw the you posted these photos, the record, whatever was the receipt. But it doesn't always work. Sometimes you get
No.
somebody that's there to argue for the sake of arguing, and then then sometimes I'll say, I'll usually contact my back girl, the back guy,
Yep.
and say, what do you want me to do on this one? What do you want to do in this case? And I had one time, one of them came back. She said, "Yeah, we've had a problem with this guy in the past. Drop the hammer
Oh,
on him."
yeah. I don't know if everyone knows this, but we've actually policed things heavily. Like once you get your point across, we don't need you to beat it and
Yeah.
beat it into the ground, right?
Well,
Yeah.
they on this one, they said, no, you do it, you whatever you want to post, we're not going to restrict anything you say on it. So I went back and I said, I politely answered your question. I gave the information that you asked for. I did whatever you needed. I ask you to politely tread lightly going forward. And if there's anything else that legitimately comes to mind, we're happy to here to assist you with it. And they came back with like three more horrible comments, and they got deleted so fast that nobody got to see them. And I said, at this point, my patience is zero. Okay, you're definitely not going to buy the car. The information you think is right about the car is wrong, and everybody's politely pointed out to you. So I just don't think you're going to be able to, you're going to be able to effectively comment going forward on it.
Yep.
And that's it. Anytime, so no matter what the guy said at that point on, 15 people flagged him and he was gone in the
Yep.
seconds. It
Yep.
didn't make a difference what he was trying to say.
Yep.
And I kind of felt bad for him. And
Oh, yes.
then I've had other, I've done some pretty strange sales on Bring a Trailer. Like I did things that now seem common, but never happened before. Like we
I
had
think you were the first person to sell all the timers. You
the
had a bunch of
timers. Yeah.
yeah, uh-huh.
That went to Arturo Keller, our good friend Arturo Keller, who took the nicest man. I loved him. He was so much fun to do business with. But his family didn't let him have a credit card, so getting him to register and Bring a Trailer was impossible. It was just so difficult to get him to sign up and Bring a Trailer. And I'm sitting there walking through with Deborah and trying to help him. And then the grandson was in there, and they finally just said, "Can't you just bid on it for me?" And I said, "No, I can't bid on my own auction."
Yep.
I said, "But you know what I'll do? I'm going to put you in touch with a really good friend. You make friends with him, invite him up to your museum. He'll bid for you. You wire the money to him. If you win, you'll square away with him." And I said, "I hate to do that, but I'm gonna let everybody know that this is all we went to." So I told my bat handler and bat manager or whatever it was for the auction manager, and he won those watches, and he loved them so much. He put them on. They were in a
Yep.
beautiful display case at the museum, all the different times, because a bunch of them all had, even though they were all fake names, they had like Carrera Panamericana 53, 54. And we told everybody that somebody just put these badges on the timers. They had nothing to do with any of the races. But yeah, he loved that. But the other one that was really amazing was I had Wayne Baker had his Porsche parts collection. He,
Oh, yes, I remember that. Yep.
about maybe a little over a year ago. He contacted me. He knew he was closing down his business for a year, and he contacted me 2 weeks before he had to move out of his building to lease it out to somebody else. And he says, "Can you help me sell all these 356 parts?" And I said, "Well, I'm in San Diego to photograph and video a bunch of cars. I'll stop by." And I went there, and I knew that it was just crazy. He had room after room after room after room,
Yeah.
floor to ceiling, with Porsche
It's a
parts.
huge amount of
Oh, it was
parts.
ludicrous. I mean, there's no way in the world to inventory them. And I think it was the first time I had an auction that had over 1,000 photos on it. So we put these things up there, and he was really nice. He made a deal with me that we'd split anything over $30,000 on the sale. And I told my company, "That's a really great deal. We should, sell these things through the company account." And he goes, "No, no, no, we don't want to be involved in these parts. You sell them." So I said, "Are you sure?" And I said, "No, no." So I put them on the Bill Noon account, and I think they sold for $175,000.
Yeah, I remember that
And he was
auction.
they were so happy and so excited. They couldn't believe it. They were just thought that
Yeah.
was the coolest thing in the world. And then all these other guys started putting Porsche parts up for sale. And it's
I
like,
know.
and they never quite did as well as that first
No,
auction.
you're not only are you a trend starter, Bill, but you're such a known quantity to everyone that there's a lot of confidence when people are bidding on the stuff you're offering.
Well, really do like some of the oddities that we've put up over the years, and not super valuable. I mean, and then also, I mean, I remember putting up. I had a collection of fairly important early racing Fiat engines, and all these things from the late 1930s all the way through the early 50s. And these things go to Stanguilinis and Citalias and Ciatas and all these different cars, and there was cylinder heads and blocks and differentials and really really important parts. And I was moving out of California, and they were all in my garage, and I put them up for sale at no reserve. There was one bid for $150. And the guy who bought them knew exactly what they were worth. And immediately after the sale was over, a guy was desperate to get the rear differential, and he offered him $1,500 just for the rear differential for this part in the car. And he held out and he said no, but he ended up selling just the differential, which was not complete. It was broken. It needed some repairs for $2,500 that he paid
Oh,
$150. So anybody that tells you that everything is fully fairly priced on Bring a Trailer, there are no deals, bargains, I disagree. I said,
I disagree too.
even the best sellers, the best pros that think they know what they're doing, give away the farm once in a while. You never know
Yeah.
what's going to happen.
It happens every once in a while. Not too often, thank God. Well, Bill, this has been a pleasure. I see your son walking forth in the background. He's ready to go surfing. So why don't you
Yes.
take him surfing? You know what we need to do is we need to have a part two here because there's a lot more that we didn't even touch on. I didn't go into most of the cars that I wanted to talk to you about. You've offered so many interesting things. So if you'll do it, we'd love to have you
Yeah,
back.
I
We
know.
can talk
Now that
about
I know
more.
what the routine is, just
Let's do it again. I mean, I would love to hear more about the Navy days too, and your time in ships. I love that stuff too.
no
So
worries. I'm at your guys' convenience anytime, always.
well, a pleasure to have you, Bill, and pleasure to hear your stories, and a pleasure to have you as part of the community, man. I really mean that. It's always great when we see your name pop up anywhere in the comments or see a submission from you. So thanks for everything. Thanks for doing this today, and we'll do it again. Okay.
Cheers. Have a great afternoon.
All right. Thank you, and thank you everybody for listening. We will see you next time. As always, comments and questions and concerns. Podcast at bringatrailer.com. We'll see you next time.